Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Tesla Owners UK event coming through YouTube and Facebook, I believe, tonight. We have a lovely sunny day, actually, across the country, which has been quite nice. Lots of power walls have been topped up by some renewable energy and our cars as well, which is, I'm sure, great to see. And, of course, it is Earth Day, which is awesome. And I know lots of you have been sort of doing the odd thing here and there to promote Earth Day and do some stuff with that. So that's awesome. teslaowners.org.uk/Earth Day. I need to double check the link, actually. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've posted it on the group. Lots of challenges. It's not the official event that we're running like last year and the year before, but there's a few things there which yeah, you might be able to sort of have some fun with maybe today or across the weekend coming. So yeah. So tonight we have an awesome guest, Jenny Kane, who is coming from the UK Atomic Energy Authority, which sounds very official and very fancy. So I will introduce you to Jenny. Hey, Jenny, how are you?
All right, thank you very much.
Awesome, perfect. So, Jenny, you work for the UK Atomic Energy Authority. Now, your job title is Production Area Lead for Vessels. What does that mean? Because I read that and I was like, I have literally no clue what that is. So could you give us a brief what that means?
So I need to start at the beginning, which is, so the UK Atomic Energy Authority does fusion energy, not fission. Although it's got atomic, it is nuclear, but it's not fission, breaking atoms apart. It's joining atoms together, so it's fusion. And we, as part of UKAA, we do many things. We run reactors, experimental reactors, but at the moment, we also have just started, well, we're 2 years in, to designing a UK fusion power plant. So we're actually going to have a shot at getting fusion electricity out. We're targeting the 2040s, which I know sounds like a long time away, but there's a lot to do. I'm part of that program. There is the sections of the reactor, the power plant, that are right next to that fusion plasma, which is basically like a star in the middle of it. All that section that is around that is the first thing that fusion energy hits. That's all the bit that I manage. I'll talk more about that later when I talk a bit more about fusion. So I basically manage a team that are busy trying to design the bits of the power plant that are there. They run. It's like putting a blowtorch on the materials for pretty much permanently. We have to deal with even higher temperatures than that. Huge heat. It's like the heat you get as you re-enter the atmosphere when you've been up in space. We also have to breed the fuel that goes into the reactor to make it go. So that is the parts of the reactor, as we call it, that I actually manage, and that is what I do.
Awesome. That sounds, I mean, my job sounds so boring in comparison. I'm so jealous of all these fancy jobs. So before that, let's go before. So can you go through your sort of history of jobs? There were some wind turbines, I believe, involved. Yeah.
I did aerospace engineering. Sounded exciting, fancied designing aeroplanes, ended up doing placements and stuff on jet engines and things. Got really into gas turbines, went and did a heat transfer and aerodynamics PhD on ramjet engines. So going at hypersonic speeds, a small experiment on that. But during that PhD, I essentially got the green bug. I decided that I just wanted to work in renewables. And I figured there must be someone that wants an aerospace engineer, an aerodynamics engineer. And I ended up getting a job for a wind turbine company, which seemed to make sense. There's blades on a wind turbine. And I worked there for about 7.5 years, and then needed to move and looked for another renewable energy company. And fusion it's got no carbon dioxide emissions when it's actually running. It's got plentiful fuel. It is a renewable energy. We've just got to make it work and get it onto the grid.
Awesome. So you obviously been excited about sort of renewable energy for quite a while. When did you buy into the Tesla brand as well? Because for those that don't know, Jenny and James own a Tesla. So when did that happen, and why did that happen as well?
Yeah, okay. So obviously decarbonising transport is incredibly important for the climate. So it always made sense. I totally get that what we need to be doing is we need to be running everything off electricity, and we need to be making that electricity with renewable energy. So as soon as electric cars came out, James and I were very interested. We were always a one family car, try to do as much cycling as we can as well. And so it wasn't until the Tesla came out that it was practical to have a single car for us to do long journeys. It has to be said that we originally signed up for a Model 3, had a deposit down for a Model 3, and then James got impatient. I totally got it. He really wanted to kickstart the electric vehicle revolution, felt we couldn't wait, that people needed to get their electric cars, show how good they were, so that the cheaper cars could be made and more people would buy them. And I remember us going for a weekend away. We were sat in Cambridge in a museum, and somehow he convinced me that the finances worked. And before I knew it, we had a Model S. And we now have, after 4 years, we now have the Model 3, which I completely love. So much easier to park than the Model S, in my opinion.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, I curbed a wheel today, so I'm in my Model S, so I'm not happy about that. Awesome. So there's so many different aspects to this, and I must admit I'm a complete novice at this subject. So I presume lots of our members are as well, because frankly, it blows my mind what's going on. So can you go to the bare basics? So you touched on it briefly, but when I hear nuclear, I think of nuclear power. I've never really heard of this, to be honest, until sort of the last few weeks. Can you explain the obvious differences and why one is one thing and one is the other, and maybe some of the negatives of one and negatives of this, just to sort of go down to simple level, mainly for me.
No. Okay, so we get it all the time. Fission, which is the nuclear power that we have now, that Hinkley C is, that is when you have heavy atoms that are generally highly radioactive, and you split them apart, basically. And that splitting apart, that change in mass, as you split them apart, you split big atoms into small atoms, you get a change of mass, you use E equals mc squared, and that means you get a lot of energy out. So that is fission. Fusion, what you do is you take very low atomic numbers, so usually hydrogen or isotopes of hydrogen, so special types of hydrogen, and you put them under huge pressure and huge temperature, and you essentially give them enough energy that they actually don't repel each other anymore. They actually join together, so that you're joining small, low atomic number atoms into larger ones. You still have a change in mass as you do that, and that E equals delta mc squared again gives you your energy out. So in both ways, it's called nuclear because you are doing things to atoms, and you're using that E equals mc squared equation to give you the energy out. But in fission, you split things apart. In fusion, you join them together. Fission, I've already explained. Generally, the fuel is very radioactive in itself, and that makes everything else incredibly radioactive. The waste tends to be tens of thousands of years of harmful radioactivity. And of course, with a fission reaction, once you get it started, one atom then it shoots off other smaller atoms, which then break up more atoms, and you can get, although we're very good at controlling it now, you can get this runaway situation, and you end up with some kind of, worst cases, you get some kind of explosion. In fusion, it's so flipping hard to actually get these atoms to join together, and you have to be running so hot. In fact, you're running 10 times hotter than the center of the sun when you're doing these reactions on Earth, that anything goes wrong and the whole thing fizzles out. So you can never have these runaway reactions. Plus, the fuel is just hydrogen. So you don't have these radioactive situations. So we do use a slightly radioactive piece of fuel, but it has a half-life of 12 years. So it is just not the same as uranium and plutonium and things like that. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a start.
Yeah, no, I think that does. Yeah, my brain sort of got that. So you're saying is there a waste then from fusion? So
there isn't the waste like there is in fission, where the spent fuel rods in fission are, tens of thousands of years before they become safe enough to be near. In fusion, so we use, the other thing to point out is that we use tiny amounts of fuel, tiny amounts, a teaspoon of, I think, to be able to run the jet reactor, which is the largest reactor running the proper fuels, you can actually run it with fuel that is the same weight as a postage stamp. It's tiny amounts of fuel. And so although you've got this slightly radioactive piece of fuel that has a 12-year half-life, it's a tiny amount. And even when you scale that up to a power plant, it's still a very small amount. You can, as you run the reaction, you can make the outside of the reactor radioactive, but again, it's not the same as fission. We're talking much lower. We're talking tens, hundreds of years half-life, and not the quantities that we're talking about in fission. So it's a totally different scale.
Got you. And now forgive me for my ignorance here, because we talk about hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and it sounds like this is fusion power, is sort of the holy grail of energy in theory. Is it purely because it's too big, you can't fit it in a car? And again, forgive me, because it's obviously a silly question, but
yes.
Yeah. So is it, why do they have to be a certain size? And is there a sort of perfect size, or is it still trying to find that perfect space?
Size is an interesting thing. So at the moment, so we have the existing jet reactor, which some Tesla owners had a tour around a year or so ago. That's about, and it's about, let me have a think, it's about 6 meters across in diameter. But if you're talking about a power plant, you could be talking about, actually the one we're designing right now is sort of 10 or 12, the actual vessel. But you could make it even bigger, and some other designs are even bigger. There are private companies that think they can try and make it smaller, but there is a critical mass to be able to get enough power out of that reaction and still be able to work all the machinery and still get positive electricity out, which is all we're about. So we don't think we'll ever, well, maybe in the very distant future, we might be able to make it small enough to go into a car. But certainly at the moment, we're talking the actual reactor, maybe 10, 12 meters diameter. But don't forget that the electricity we produce with the fusion power plant can power your car. So you can absolutely say that we could have fusion powered cars in the future.
Got you. Perfect. So what are the major challenges and the engineering? Is it the engineering, or is it getting enough power, or how does that work?
Okay, so we'll go slightly back to basics again. So what I haven't said yet is that fusion is the way the sun makes energy. So basically everything comes from a fusion reaction. So on the sun, you have pretty pure hydrogen, actually, so it's not the heavy type of hydrogen, and it is under enormous pressure. Although it's not as hot in the center of the sun, it's only about 15 million degrees in the core of the sun. It's got enormous pressure because of the gravity, the size of the sun. So on Earth, we can't create that pressure in something the size that we can have on Earth. So what we have to do instead is we have to make it incredibly hot in the center of our reactors. So to create a sun on Earth, you have to go to 150 million degrees, which is 10 times hotter than the sun. You can argue whether we or CERN are the hottest place on the solar system, but it's looking pretty much like we are one of two of the hottest places you can ever be on the solar system. So you've got this huge temperature that you have to contain. Now, the temperature isn't actually too much of a problem, because by the time you get to the edge of the plasma, you're only running at a few thousand degrees. So we have materials for that. But you also have a huge amount of heat power that you have to withstand, basically. And as I've said, this is like re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, but you have to do it 24/7 if you've got a power plant. So that takes some pretty exciting engineering, which is completely the area that I deal with. So we are just trying to withstand those temperatures, withstand the force. Remember, we're in a vacuum, so you've got very low atmosphere in there. So there's a huge amount of challenge, and that's only one of the small pieces of challenge that we need to overcome.
Perfect. So you referenced it's 10 times hotter than the sun, etc., etc. How much actual electricity is needed to kickstart that process?
Yeah. So maybe the best way for me to describe this is to use JET as an example. So JET is the Joint European Torus. It's the reactor, it's an experimental reactor. It's actually been around for almost 40 years. It's actually running right now with the right kind of fuel to run a power plant. And it's literally about 5 miles from my house over near Oxford. To give you an idea, to get that started and running, we need about 24 megawatts of electricity, and probably, and then you would have to scale that for a larger power plant. The thing is that once you've got it going with a power plant, the one we are designing, and there's one in Europe being designed, and there's one in Japan being designed. Once you've got that plasma going, once you've got the reaction going in the center, it is self-sustaining. Then you can then produce, we're designing it so that you are producing enough electricity out that you can power all your cooling systems, all the things you need to do, and still have electricity to spare. So on JET, you need about 24 megawatts to get it going. With a power plant, it will be larger than that, but it will only be for a short period of time before it starts working for itself.
And once it has started that process of working for itself, are we then going back to that 12 years that you referenced, or how does that work?
Okay, so at that point, once you've got it going, you're then injecting. So we use the fuels we use is they're heavy versions of hydrogen. So they've got the same number of protons, but they've got more neutrons in them. So they are deuterium and tritium. Deuterium is incredibly abundant. You can get it from water using standard chemical processes. About 1 in every 6,500 atoms of water is this special kind, deuterium. Tritium, which is the other kind of fuel, doesn't naturally occur, but you can produce it from lithium, which is very abundant in the world. Millions of years of fuel available for that. Now, there's something very cool. When we do fusion, when we join our atoms together, we release a neutron. And if you hit lithium with a neutron, you get tritium out. So what you do is you surround your fusion reaction with what we call a lithium blanket. You can think of it as being surrounded, the reactor being surrounded by this lithium sort of blanket, and it will then be producing tritium that you take off and then you put back in to your reaction. So you create your own fuel, and also all the heat that's coming out, you then convert into your electricity using just standard turbines to produce your electricity.
And is standard turbines the only way of doing that, or are there other ways?
Yeah, at the moment, we think the best way at the moment is to use either steam turbines or possibly turbines using carbon dioxide, which is also a relatively well-known technology, although not quite as advanced as your steam turbines that you get everywhere.
Got you. And now I'm completely thinking off the top of my head now. The in some of the deserts, I've seen solar farms which mirror the heat of the sun effectively into, from what I understand, like a sand to make a liquid sand, I think. Is that something that's, because it sounds like you've got enough heat.
It's interesting you say that. So one of the ways we might take out the energy is using a molten salt or a liquid metal, which sounds crazy. I know that you would have a flowing liquid metal or a molten salt, but actually that could be quite a good way of, because remember, everything is so hot anyway. So if you've got a molten metal going through, you're going to be running at 500 degrees or something, and you can actually extract heat using that. But you would put it through a heat exchanger. You would almost certainly put it through a heat exchanger, and you would be heating up water to make steam, or heating up carbon dioxide to put through.
And can you add multiple of those techniques together? Or is it once it's hit the first one, the temperature's hit the point where it's too low and it's not really useful anymore?
You wouldn't, because you get too many losses, definitely. What might be useful, how about we show the step video now? Would that be a good idea? That gives people a sort of a run through of what
perfect
looks like. Would that be okay, Josh?
Yeah, sounds good. Josh
will
fire it on.
Words, so that's
some words. Cool.
Yeah, it's got
right,
words.
we'll watch this video then. If Josh should mute us both, and we'll go over to this.
So what is the STEP programme? The United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority and its industrial and academic partners are working together to begin the journey to a commercial and viable power plant based on fusion energy. There are a number of challenges that need to be addressed, and at the UK AEA we have a proud heritage of R&D in all the aspects needed to realise them. Incredible heat loads similar to that experienced by the Space Shuttle in a component called the divertor is being addressed by the world's most advanced spherical fusion experiment, MASS-DEW, utilising a revolutionary divertor design called the Super X. Tritium is one of the fusion fuels to be used in a commercial reactor, and it will need to be bred and stored. And our new facility HEAT will investigate the entire cycle, from the creation of tritium to its handling, separation, storage, and to investigate waste. Remote maintenance will be vital for such an inhospitable place, and the experience of our world-leading robotics centre RACE, with their decades of experience in handling fusion components, will lead the way in creating a power plant design designed to increase availability. Even though a fusion power plant is inherently safe, bringing an entirely new energy generation product to the market will require testing, validation, qualification. And the UK AEA has decades of experience and has created the Fusion Technology Facility to ensure the UK is the world leader in the validation of fusion components. Fusion is the process that powers our sun and the stars, and the incredible high energy from the neutrons can damage surrounding structures and components, and significant research is already underway at the Materials Research Facility to better understand these damage mechanisms and to enable us to find new tolerant materials. And finally, with our experience on JET and specifically MassDue, we have the tools to understand the behaviour of the plasma. 1 kilogram of fusion fuel is equivalent to 10 million kilograms of fossil fuel. And bringing this all together and working in partnership, STEP will bring humanity one step closer to the realization of fusion and a dawn of a new clean high energy density baseload.
Awesome. That helps as well. That's really good. It's so good to have sort of multiple explanations of how it works, because, as I said, I'm blown away by this thing. And Darren made a brilliant comment in the chat saying, "I feel like we're hearing state secrets from the government. This is so like high tech." So that's awesome. Where do you get the hydrogen from?
Oh yeah, so you can just get the deuterium. It just comes from water, and the tritium. So at the moment, because we don't breed tritium in this way because we haven't built a power plant yet. Interestingly, the tritium comes from it's a waste product of some fission reactors. There's some fission reactors in Canada called CANDU reactors, and one of their byproducts is tritium. And so we have to buy the tritium from Canada, even though it's a waste product. But they only produce quite small quantities of this, and it's incredibly expensive. So it's very important we're able to breed our own tritium.
Got you. And going back to that, you referenced the lithium side of things. Now, again, apologies because it's such probably a novice question, but obviously with electric vehicles, you have batteries that contain lithium, and at the end of their life cycle, there will be a time where they need to be recycled. And from my understanding, it's like 95% recyclable. What are the chances of a Model S that's now 5 years old in 10 years time, a piece of the lithium from that battery, or in 20 years time coming into one of these reactors?
Right. So yes, absolutely. Same type of lithium. The only slight snag for us, which is a little bit of annoyance, is we need a particular type of lithium, which you actually have to create. It's not the kind of, you can't just use the same lithium that you would use in your battery. We have to put it through, it's actually centrifuges, like they actually have to use to produce some of the fission. But it's not going to produce, it's not radioactive, don't worry. But what it does is we have to do a special process to get the right kind of lithium out. But there isn't any reason that, we might well use exactly the same lithium. It is, interestingly, we have to be careful because although there is loads of lithium around in the world, of course, it is not all mined at the moment. And so actually the rise of electric cars with the rise of fusion, we're just going to need to be careful that we always keep the supply up. But I don't see why we couldn't in the future be seeing a Model S becoming the fuel for the fusion reactor.
Perfect. Now, going dark, can you make weapons from this?
No, You cannot.
Okay, that's a quick and easy answer to that. So that's a no go. And if you would, it sounds like you need a massive building to make any.
Yeah, just so there is a slight thing there, because obviously we would be having tritium, which is slightly radioactive, on site, and it is quite important we don't produce too much. So we would only ever be wanting to produce just the right amount of tritium to get back into the reactor, so you've not got lots of it hanging around. And part of that would be for security reasons. You wouldn't want to be stockpiling tritium, just because you don't want it hanging around. But the great thing is that we make it, we use it. So yeah, hopefully that answers.
And what are the challenges that stand in the way of putting fusion on the grid?
Yeah. Well, the whole temperature that you heard a lot of in that video. So we need materials that can withstand this neutron bombardment. So that if you shoot high energy neutrons at any kind of material, you're actually knocking around the atoms in that material, and the material can actually turn from one type of material to another one, which suddenly isn't what you want in the way. So there's that whole piece about materials and using the right materials and developing, adjusting materials so they can work for us better. We then need very strong magnets. The way that we contain the reaction and keep it away, actually it doesn't touch the walls except in certain conditions, is we use magnets around them. So we're holding in this reaction, and it's actually a plasma in there. It's got so hot that you've actually stripped away your electrons from your nucleus, and you've got a plasma with positive and negative charges going around in a soup in there. So you need these very strong magnets. So we're looking at it would be superconducting magnets and possibly high temperature superconducting magnets, which if anyone knows about that, that's pretty high technology. We've got the whole maintenance of this reactor. We need to be able to get in there and change components over fairly rapidly and fairly often, and we need to do that without it being too expensive. We can't be switching off these power plants for too long, because then the cost of your electricity will go up too much because we won't be generating enough. So there is a large amount to do, including the actually making this wonderful blanket to make our own fuel also needs to be properly sorted out. There are loads of designs. There are some that are going to be tested on a reactor that's being built right now in the south of France, but it's actually getting all that engineering together and making it all work together and show that it can work day in, day out to produce electricity at a good cost. That is the challenge.
Got you. And there are obviously those challenges sound like, I'm a complete novice. It sounds like they've been going on for a while, because we've got a comment here saying I'm 77 years old, and I remember from my school days that we would have a discussion about fusion power that was coming in 25 years. How confident are you now that, or maybe not you, but it's sort of the company, the organisation as a whole, that we're really going to get there? And then a second part of that question is sort of, has it been worth that wait, I guess?
Okay. Right, let's do it in order. So yes, there is a continual joke in fusion that is always, whichever number you want, 30 years away, 25 years away, 40 years away. One of the things you have to remember is funding. So the funding for fusion has actually always been very low, preventing these big jumps. I have to say that you can look at things like Tesla's. It takes somebody with huge vision to come in and actually make that commitment and make that financial commitment to make a big jump in technology. What we are seeing now is that governments, because of climate change, are actually investing much more heavily. So we're actually pretty small fry, but for the UK government, it's a big deal. They've put in 220 million to do to do the very beginning concept design of STEP, which is the video that you just saw. So that's quite a lot of money for the UK government to put in. Now, over in France, we've got a cross-world reactor being built. It's not a power plant. It's still an experiment, but what it is going to do is it's going to produce more energy out than it takes in, which is a big deal for fusion. That's a huge step. That is literally being built now. In fact, could we have photo 6, Josh? So this picture that I'm going to show you is of this reactor, this fusion experiment called ITER, ITER. It's in the south of France, and that is it. What you are seeing there is a very large fusion experiment that is going to produce more energy out than energy in, and that's cross worldwide, including the UK. We have a huge involvement in ITER. If you show number 7, I think this is going to show you a picture of that. So you can see the plasma in the middle, you can see the building on the outside. So this is ITER. This is literally being built now. And if you show photo number 8, this is the inside. So this is this donut shape piece that you can see the pink there coming in. This is actually it in place now. That happened about a month ago. You can see the scale of this thing. And this is actually going to be operating. We are now only a few years from first plasma on this. So this is a very large step from where we've been in the last 40 years. So we've got huge investment going on all over the world. Japan, happily, South Korea, their governments are pumping money into it. We've got the ITER project. We've got a European project that UKA have also been involved in. The UK government gets it. So we are starting to see proper investment. We've also just learned so much from experiments like JET, like the other reactor at UKAEA called MAST. We have private fusion companies like Tokamak Energy happening. And once you start getting private companies thinking they can make money out of this, then you're starting to see that you're really getting somewhere now. People must think it's getting close, and the technology is there that they can get investment and they think they can make money out of it. So hopefully that's answered your why do we think we're closer than we were 77 years ago. And I've forgotten the second half of the question, Will.
If it's taken this long, is it really worth it?
Is it really worth it? Yes, it is really worth it. So what we have to remember is that baseload energy is very important. I did see a question come up in the chat about talking about was it a base load? So basically you switch it on, you produce electricity, or is it more like a wind turbine where you ramp up and down the electricity and obviously dependent on some external factor? Now, what we imagine fusion being as is an addition, possibly, but certainly a replacement to your fossil fuel. So you've got that base load, large 1 gigawatt power plants that you can put in, but you're intrinsically safe. You can't have an explosion. You've got low waste. You've got abundant fuel that's going to be around for millions of years, and you don't produce carbon dioxide. So you can sort of sweep out your fossil fuels and possibly also your fission, I would hope, and replace it with this very large base load, which what you also have to remember is the cost of that fuel, the cost of running it is negligible because you're producing basically your own fuel. So it is, people talk about it being a holy grail. We don't like to think of it as a holy grail because that means you never get to it. But it really is a fabulous source of energy that is well worth us doing. and it would exist with things like wind turbines and solar, which you would be able to switch on and off to go with demand as well.
Got you. So I've got like 5 questions just based off that one section, but I'll do them individually. Are the different groups, so you referenced the one in France, are the different groups around the world working on this together? Are they sharing data, or is it simply a race first the post and then sort of profit from there?
So traditionally, up until almost now, it's been completely open source. So basically it's all been research based, everything is paper based. It's all about publishing papers. Everything out there is shared. And because of the cost of it, often it has been consortiums of countries. So ITER is fabulous. It's got South Korea, it's got China, it's got USA, it's got European Union, it's got India, it's got Russia in it. And all these countries are collaborating, groups of countries are collaborating, and they're literally building different parts of that power, of ITER, the reactor, in different countries, and then shipping them in and putting them in. Everyone gets a piece. What I can say now is we're in quite an interesting situation, because governments have begun to realise that there is money to be had. There's economic advantage in getting to fusion first. Because if you've got the technology, then you can sell it to other countries. And that is, in the end, what governments like. So we are now starting to get into a place where there is competition going on. Now, there's obviously downsides to not sharing the results of everything. But there is also something quite positive about the fact we're now in, a fusion race, where people are actually competing to be there first, which is another reason why it's starting to look like suddenly it's not going to be that ever increasing time until the next, until we get to fusion, because people are actually in competition now. We've also got these private companies like First Light and Tokamak Energy, who are, they've got patents, they're keeping it protected because they want to get their fusion reactor to market first.
Perfect. And we've touched on that investment and how that's now 220 million. How has that changed over the years? I mean, it sounds like we've been doing this for a long time, a lot of research. Has that investment, grown? I mean, sort of, it sounds like it's recently has grown, but yeah. prior to that, and how does that investment, the 220 million, compare to fission power?
That's a good question. I don't think I know the answer to that one.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that one, although I would have, I can pretty much say that I'm sure that the various grants and subsidies and things to build fission parts are in the billions, I'm sure, compared to the millions that a single country is committing to fusion. But what you have to remember is that ITER being built now, we're talking in the, I think, about 40 billion to build it. So that is why you're talking about consortiums. So that's the kind of money we're talking to build this experimental reactor, which in the grand scheme of when you think about how much things like Olympics and football World Cups cost is small fry, but that's the kind of money we're talking about. Input in financing fusion has been very low up until recent years. This whole "it's a certain time away" was based on a certain level of investment. You can actually go back, I think, to a paper where someone said, if you fund fusion to this much, then you can have fusion in 40 years. And so what the government did is they basically funded that much and a little bit less, and which is partly why it's always pushed out. We are finally seeing proper money coming in. And this 200 million is expected to become billions if we can prove we've got a concept and we can get investment. We're also, the government is very keen to start getting private investment into fusion. So it might well be it's not all government money that is going into fusion that will be attractive enough to large engineering companies, or even large petroleum companies, companies like BP, Shell are now very interested in funding things like fusion, because again, if they've got the patents, if they've got the intellectual property, they can sell it.
Got you. And I should have asked this at the beginning, but the UK Atomic Energy Authority, is that purely government?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. It is a government agency. And our whole mission is around making fusion reality. However, we have expertise that is often useful to fission, just because of having the nuclear expertise, the materials expertise, the remote maintenance expertise. So we sometimes offer a hand for things like helping with the technology required to help clean up Fukushima, for example. Also, a lot of what we do in fusion is applicable to other industries. So with some of the materials testing we do, there's lots of other industries that want to use our equipment, and so we do sell some services. So although we are pretty laser focused on making fusion a reality, we can get money from other places because of the kind of work that we do and the equipment and the test rigs we've got.
Perfect. So next question is discussing the ability to ramp it up and ramp it down. From what you discussed, it sounds like there's a base load and we're trying to aim for that. How easy is it, or would it be in the future to adjust that level, or is it pretty fixed?
So the plasma physics, as it is called, because the soup of atoms in the center that have been stripped of their electrons is called a plasma. Controlling that plasma and just getting it started and gently stopping it, and stop it wobbling around and hitting stuff it shouldn't be hitting, is incredibly difficult and includes very high-tech plasma physics models, which is, I'm an engineer, not my area. So just the getting it up and stable is a big challenge, and keeping it there and not making it fizzle out. So at the moment, we are not really envisaging being able to change that plasma so that we produce more and less power. It is not beyond the realms of possibility, because as we learn more and more how to control that plasma, and the plasma physicists get better at understanding how to control it, and we as engineers can do what is needed, that you couldn't see that you could get more power out or less power out. But at the moment, just getting that stable plasma, so we would be switch it on and leave it on.
Perfect. Now, I put you on the spot here slightly, because I presume the answer is that it's not the case, but would an equivalent amount of money invested in solar and wind by the government be actually a better investment, or is it just we don't know yet?
Well, what I would say, having been in the wind industry, is that now solar and wind are up and running. Yes, they maybe should have equivalent subsidy to fossil fuels because they get more, but we can argue over that all day. But basically, wind turbines and solar are now private enterprises. They don't need the government investment in the same way. Government investment, well, in the UK should have happened perhaps a bit more. We would have been a bit further ahead on our own wind turbine technology, but that's another story too. Back 20 years ago, but now that is a private business that, it reduces its costs, it makes itself more attractive, people want to buy it, it doesn't need the government incentive anymore. Whereas this new amazing technology, that if we can just get it to work, get those first power plants out, could literally change the world, then that seems like a very good place for the government to put its money, as well as if it builds jobs, it builds high technology industry that is transferable in a lot of cases, and think of the benefit of being able to sell your technology to other places.
So if Betfred or Ladbrokes offered the chance for you to bet when this was going to go live, and you could pick 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050, or 2060. What would be your personal? And I must stress, it's your personal guess. It doesn't have to be your work hat on.
Well, I can already say I work on a program that is trying to get electricity out of a power plant in the 2040s. That means we have to have designed it, built it, commissioned it, switched it on, got the electricity out in the 2040s, and that's what we're doing. So I'm going to put my money on getting electricity out of a power plant by the 2040s. And if we don't manage it, I've got a feeling China or South Korea might. Actually, then turning that into a commercial power plant is probably, if we're honest about it, another 10 or 20 years away. Just getting from that prototype, look, we can produce electricity, to something that is commercially viable. What I imagine there will be another, we will then make another one, and then we've got to get it into that place where it's actually commercial. So it will need sort of help along the way. So I'm thinking there's going to be electricity in the 2040s, and then another 10 to 20 years to actually make it commercially viable.
And I always want to stress again, like, is it then worth it? But I know the answer is yes, because you've already said it's yes. But to me, it's like, well, will solar and wind just beat it to the post? And will the government say, well, actually, we're net carbon zero, and it's now 2050. Actually, we've ticked that box. Let's effectively can this, lifetime of work for you and your team, and as much as that's horrible to contemplate, is that a reality?
Well, the population continues to grow for the moment, and people's standards of living continues to increase, and people want more energy. And if we turn, the way we are expecting to decarbonize is to go electricity and hydrogen based. So to be able to power your cars and to your lorries and your ships, you're going to want, and your heating, you're going to want electricity and hydrogen. And if you're going to get to net zero and then beyond, you're going to need more electricity, because more people will want more stuff, and that's just humans. We want more stuff, and as the developing world becomes developed, we hope. So there is going to be a need for more electricity. And so you're going to, even once you've got to net zero, assuming we get there, which I very much hope we do by 2040, 2050, then we're going to need more electricity. We don't just stop then, we're going to need more. And that means that you're going to need something more baseload, because there's probably going to still be fission and some fossil fuels around then, even at net zero, and you're probably having to do carbon capture to be able to get rid of that CO2. So much better to have fusion, which actually could end up economically very good.
Got you. If it fully works, and we're now in 2060, how many of these would we need? And is it one in every country? Is it 20 in every country? Is it, one in Europe? Or, how does that work and scale?
Yeah, so you are thinking replacing a standard fossil fuel power plant. I live in Didcot, so we have one just up the road, one of those with a fusion power plant. So we're talking about a gigawatt. So that's what we're designing for at the moment. That's what we imagine them to look like. So they are large. At the moment, they are still large power plants. So we're not talking about little modular things you can have around. Whether we would need the water source, like sometimes fossil and fission do, that may not be as necessary, depending how we cool things down. Again, if we use a liquid metal, don't need all the water. So that would mean you could place them in places that you can't necessarily place a fission or a fossil fueled power plant. So you're talking multiple ones in a country, definitely.
And again, going back to an earlier point of is this safe? Do you realistically think that the public will get it? Do you think they'll see the word nuclear and think, I don't want this anywhere near us? Let's not push the government to invest in this. Let's get this away from my house or whatever. Could it be renamed? I guess is another.
Yeah, well, it's why we like fusion, definitely. We don't tend to use nuclear fusion because that just gets people confused. It's partly why I'm here right now. Is a huge outreach part of UKAEA to educate the public. We do tours, and we still are doing virtual tours and talks. I think a link can be put in by Josh to give you links to where you can go to find out more and get on virtual tours, and eventually we'll be back doing in-person tours where you actually get to look around JET and actually see what is going on at UKAEA. So there is that side of things. Also, something that is quite interesting is that we are already looking for a site to place this STEP power plant on. There is currently a competition being launched. It's the usual way that in a lot of cases you actually look for a large site to place something like this on. So it's obviously government led, and we are asking communities to offer their land to put STEP on. So it's many acres, and it will have the actual power plant on, and it will be surrounded by high technology industry on the site. And what I can say is that it's very positive. There's a lot of interest in people wanting fusion in their backyard because they get that this is going to bring in jobs, that it is safe, that you've got high technology companies coming. So in general, we just need to keep the message coming out there, and people do seem to be getting it.
Got you. Now, you referenced JET and how that's running live now. Could you just remind me why that's different to STEP?
Yeah.
And is that fusion power?
Yeah.
And if so, if it is running live, can we look at data live? Can we play with it?
So let's start by some pictures. So can you do photo 1, Josh? So this is a photo looking down on JET, which is a fusion reactor. So it's got deuterium and tritium in it. It is running at 150 million degrees. Is Josh there? Is he gone for
he should be there, yeah. Josh, sorry, number 1, Josh, please.
Number 1, Josh. Photo 1.
He's pouring himself a pint, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that is actually looking down on a fusion reactor. Now, it looks pretty crazy. It's because it's an experiment. So we're running fusion, but I'm trying to understand better both the physics and the engineering of it. So it's absolutely covered in things to measure stuff and different kinds of heating. And so that is what JET looks like from the outside. Now, if we do photo 2, what you're going to see is a picture of a cutaway. So what you can see is around the outside, that's to do with the magnetic, well, it's not actually the magnetic field, it's how we get the current going. These big orange things, these are big lumps of iron around the outside. Don't worry about that. In the center, you can see this shape, which is called a torus. It's like a donut, and it's where the plasma is sitting. It's where that reaction is happening. In the middle there, that is 150 million degrees. Now, if we show number 4, photo 4, right, this is in the reactor in JET, and we're actually running it at the moment. Operations are happening. It's largely essentially metal. It's actually a beryllium wall. Don't worry about that. You've got all this. So in that is where your plasma is sitting, and it's held there by magnets around the outside. Now, this red bit on one of the sides, that is a picture. It's actually a picture taken. You don't have to do anything special. That is how it glows of the plasma. So right in the center of that, it's 150 million degrees. By the time you get to the edge, you're only at actually thousands of degrees. Now, what we can do is Josh can show a video. And what this is going to show you, it's about 40 seconds long, and it's got this weird crackling noise. Now, that is actually the noise of what is going on in the reaction. That's, you're listening to a fusion reaction there. And what you're going to see is you see it's dark, and then you're going to see the plasma start, and you'll see it grow, and then you've got your actual fusion reaction happening. So this is actually a picture of it. It glows pink is what you're going to see, and then you will see it fade away, and that is the end of what we call a pulse. Now, in these experimental reactors, that whole segment lasts about 60 seconds. So Josh, can you show video number 2? All right, that's the hottest place in the solar system.
It feels like some sort of alien sci-fi film. It's like, yeah, you just need to come up here to the back room where there's this amazing fusion power plant, and it's next level. It's amazing.
Literally just there, yeah, amazing.
So what's the coolest, and I don't mean in temperature, but I mean in awesomeness, most amazing part of jet, basically, and what that does? You know, maybe not many people talk about it or know about it. What's that one thing that for you that you think, you know, that is pretty awesome, actually?
Oh my goodness, what is the most awesome thing that I haven't already said?
I mean, it might just be it might be the crackle.
No, I know. Well, it's a bit geeky. Bit of an tip. Right. So I told you it's 150 million degrees in the center of that core, all right? And about on the edge, and this is a part of the components that I deal with, to be able to make the vacuum to get to a very low atmosphere, much below atmospheric pressure, you have to have cryogenic temperatures. So you go from 150 million degrees in the center to about 2 meters away at the edge, you're at minus 200 degrees. And that it is pretty much the steepest change in temperature, you know, in the solar system again, certainly on Earth. And that's just crazy, 150 million degrees to minus 240. And when I found that up and sort of thought about it, it seemed just amazing to me.
Yeah, that just hurts my head. Of, you know, at what point does it change temperature? Yeah, there must be a 0 degrees where it's pretty chilly, but not too bad.
At some point, it goes through 0, where it's just kind of nice. Yeah.
Perfect. So just another shout out. If anyone's got any questions in the comments, please fire them in. We've got a few more questions left, but I appreciate we're sort of running over time slightly. But I mean, I could honestly talk about this all day. It's so awesome to sort of learn about this, because like I said earlier, it's this new thing for me, at least. It sounds like lots of people in the comments knew about this for ages, but for me, it certainly is. A question here: do you engage with schools, students, other educational avenues about this? How does that work?
Yeah, so hopefully Josh has got a link again. Certainly, if you go to the UKA website, which Josh has got the link for, and I'm sure he'll put it in the posts, you can very easily find how you book up for, again, we're doing virtual tours at the moment, but those can be physical once we're post-COVID. I'm actually doing my first one next week, as it happens. They tend to be for certainly A level, maybe higher sets of GCSE, certainly A level and university. We also have something called a sun dome that we take around primary schools to try and just start the idea of how the sun makes its energy. And it's a blow up thing, and the kids go inside and they lie down. It's a bit like a planetarium with a video on the top, but it's talking about fusion instead of the stars. So yeah, it's a big part of our work. There are webinars, there's loads of actual basically lectures that you can see if you want to on the UKAEA website. So there's loads there.
Awesome. Josh is telling me that there are links in the description, but you're not supposed to click them yet, because if you click them there, then you'll end the video. So at the end, but also we'll post out the links afterwards on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So you can click them there. So I'm just running through some of our other questions. Darren is actually saying I could listen all day. This is amazing. Year 6 pupils. She wants some education for those. So
year 6. Okay, so that's the sun dome.
Yeah.
If you get in touch with our
because the other thing we have as a club is obviously we talk about this sort of stuff to children about electric cars. So maybe there's a segue that we can bring in with that. That's cool.
Yeah, we have an education, somebody specifically there for education, who's a science communication person. So he would love to talk to you, I'm certain.
So when can we cancel nuclear power?
Once we've got the fusion. Oh, so you mean fission? Nuclear fission?
Yes. Yeah.
I think we're going to need fission to get us to net zero, and that needs to happen. So we need to keep those fission reactors. What I'd kind of like to see, knowing how long a fission reactor lasts, what's that, 30 years, 30, 40 years? Wouldn't it be nice if we put up a load of fission now, and then when those are over, we replace them with fusion? That would be a good scenario in my book.
That is. One question, and it's the B word, which is Brexit. Has Brexit affected any of the development in this, or any of the resources in and out?
Oh, it's so interesting. So we are very key players in the European demonstration power plant, called DEMO, for demonstration power plant. We are still a part of that. We are now working on being associate members of something called Euratom, which allows us to continue in that club, and that was part of the Brexit negotiations and was announced that we can continue to be part of that. Demo continues. It's an interesting thing, because the UK, knowing it's leaving the European Union, and knowing therefore that our involvement in demo will be more difficult, although we are still very much needed. Luckily, UKAEA is world class in a lot of the areas required for fusion energy. So we are needed in demo and the European Union endeavour. But it brought fusion to the forefront of the government's thinking, because it was a key area in Brexit. Suddenly, our CEO, who is obviously the CEO of a government agency, was talking to even the Prime Minister to say, excuse me, you do realise what happens when we Brexit. And therefore, it gave a great opportunity to explain about fusion to government ministers. And I think that has been part of why we've managed to actually get them enthusiastic enough. And the government currently is very interested in fusion. They totally get it at the moment. And that has actually helped us have our own UK endeavour in STEP, whilst also still being involved in the European Union demo endeavour. So it's been a very interesting few years, a lot of work for our CEO, but overall it seems to have come out well, that we are still very keen to be in EU demo. They are still happy to work with us, and the agreements are in place. Plus the government has had the opportunity to learn about fusion and actually put some money into it.
Perfect. And how significant are developments in the field? This is a very technical question, which I almost don't really understand the question. But how significant are developments in the field of magnetic materials in the advancement of practical nuclear fusion?
Yeah, okay. Well, magnetic, if you mean magnets and getting magnets, improvements in building magnets, then that is incredibly important and is a major area that we need to properly sort out, because we probably are going to ultimately need high temperature magnets, which probably the person that's asked this question will know what I'm talking about. And just getting the very high field strength in a small area and maintaining that is incredibly important, and there is an awful lot of work going on. The other side of that is the person might be asking about how materials react to when they are in a magnetic field, which is actually also a very important area for us. So if you put a material, it doesn't have, so if it's a magnetic material, ferritic material, one that will stick to your, that you can stick a magnet on, it massively changes when you put it in a very high magnetic field. So there's a lot of work going on in that area as well. So I hope I answered that question for whoever it was.
Yeah, Les, thank you. So we briefly touched on water and how there might be, a requirement for enough. Are there any other geographical constraints that the future will need?
It very much depends on what technology. So what I should explain is we are in the concept phase. There are a lot of different ways of piecing together a fusion reactor. So like I said, you can either make the electricity from water, or you can make it from CO2. We could cool our components using water, CO2, helium, liquid metal, molten salt. All these things have positives and negatives. So obviously, if we do decide to use a lot of water for cooling, then we might well need to be near a large water source. Other than that, good transportation in, the usual stuff for big power plants, that you need to get stuff in and out and big equipment in and out. But other than that, there is actually very little for these. And for this site that we're actually asking people to come and bid to host, there is actually very little restrictions other than it needs to be a certain size. And you need to be happy to host it, which thankfully lots of communities seem to be at the moment.
Awesome. Now it sounds like the government are pretty much on board. Normally with these sort of new technologies, which I appreciate it's not that new, but it sort of is. That there's a lot. If the public could help, lobby government. It sounds like government are on side. What are the other things that the public could do to effectively help you and the team, do your job? Yeah,
awesome. Well, on a someone that's not an engineer or a scientist already, then just finding out about fusion and telling your friends about fusion. Tell them about this amazing technology that's carbon free, intrinsically safe, minimal waste, loads of fuel, and get them to understand the difference between fusion and fission, and understand those differences, and point out how amazing this would be if we can just go that final mile to getting electricity out of it. If you're an engineer or a scientist and you work for a company, then the program I'm particularly working on, we are letting contracts quite a lot. We have a remit to share the money we have been given by government as far across, particularly the UK economy, as we can. So we let a lot of contracts to do research work, to do manufacturing trials, to try out making materials, to do testing. So you might be interested in just taking an eye. We have a procurement list if anyone's in that place in their company, saying what contracts we're kind of expecting to let, and you could take a look. We have procurement days. You might be interested in coming to. All these things might be helpful.
Awesome. Now, I believe you've got how many children? Two? Okay. Now, if a young person like your children were watching, but weren't actually your children, what would be your, and they were like, this is amazing. I love this sort of technology. The pictures look amazing. How can I get more involved in something like this? What would be your advice for young people interested in science and technology that's awesome like this?
Well, I would say make sure you've got your maths and your science sorted out. I mean, in the end, I'm afraid there is no, you just got to have the maths and the science behind you to go into the engineering and the science side of it. So just suck up the maths and the science. I remember choosing to be an engineer after I decided I did not want to be an archaeologist anymore. Still love archaeology, but decided that I would not do archaeology anymore. So I don't want to do engineering, and realised I was going to have to do A-level maths. I was like, oh, and I did it. And obviously the rest is history. But I'm so pleased I kept my options open and was able to essentially choose where I went. Because once you've got your qualifications, you go on and do an apprenticeship is a great way to get into engineering if you're sick of the academic stuff. Loads of apprenticeships, including at UKAEA now. I would just say go whichever route you want to, but keep that maths and science open to you.
Awesome. And I believe we have got youngsters actually watching. So hello, youngsters. I sound very old when I say that. Now, what have I missed? What are the things that you think actually, Will, you've not asked me that one question, or there's a particular image or video maybe we've not looked. I don't actually know what photos we've got. So is there anything we've missed? Anything I should focus on?
I think, well, I mean, maybe we should just put up photo 9, which is the step artist impression, which is not how it's going to look at all, but it just gives you an idea of what we're talking about. This is like so what you can see there is you've got this little plasma reactor in the center, and then you've got this huge building around it. And the reason you've got this huge building around it is you do need to take stuff in and out of a fusion reactor at the moment. Stuff doesn't last very long because of the conditions it's in. So we have to often lift equipment out, and that is what will happen here. You just have to do it as quickly and efficiently as you can. So that just gives you an idea of the scale of amazing plasma, 150 million degrees, to scale of plant, which is largely about maintaining that reactor to get your power out.
Awesome. I could look at all these images and videos all day. I mean, you get paid to do it, so it's good for you.
It's paperwork too.
Well, yeah, paperwork stuff. Yeah, there we go. I think I just really want to say a big thank you. I came into this not knowing sort of anything about this really, and I think I'll now turn into a bit of an advocate for this power, because it's just like, it seems like a no-brainer that if we can get there, and it sounds like that there is potential for us to get there soon-ish, at least in my lifetime, hopefully. So yeah, I just want to say thank you, Jenny, really for your time, not only in tonight but also in your day job, because renewable energy and is so important to all of us, and for my children and your children's future and that sort of thing. So a big thank you, really, from our point of view. It's just so refreshing to speak to someone that's so interested in and knows, when you sort of understand something, sort of, and then someone just comes in, the next day with like this completely blows your mind. So
you see the people I work with, honestly, I'm surrounded by crazy people. No, thank you for the very good questions, really good questions. And there's someone asked about the licensing of the site. Not necessarily is the answer to that person. And
okay. Yes, I did see that come through.
Probably not is the answer to that question.
Sounds good. Perfect. Well, I just again sort of want to say thank you. The comments are going crazy now, just to saying thank you so much for your time, your dedication, and all that. So yeah, thank you so much. Just for those that like this sort of stuff, we do this sort of every 2 weeks roughly with an interesting guest. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to us on YouTube, and we will see you very soon for another event. But is there anything I've missed? We plugged you, I think, on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to, if you're interested?
The UKAA website.
Okay, go to the website. Go to the website, everyone.
I think we've got all the social handles, all of them.
So in the description is the link for anyone that wants to learn more. And just say, it sounds like get the word out there if you're interested and think it's a good thing, which I think, from my understanding at least, it is a good thing. So just do that. Perfect. Great. Well, we're going to see everyone soon, and happy Earth Day to everybody. And I've planted seeds today. I'm going to plant a tree tomorrow morning. That's what we need to do. Lots of comments coming through. Lots of thank yous. Perfect. Well, thank you, Jenny. We will see you soon.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.